So I'm going to show you a very simple way that you can mix colors with oil paint using just these 5 colors, and you can mix any color in the world that you see. You can mix it perfectly with these 5 colors. The only exception are super bright, vivid colors. So you'll need to go and purchase those colors specifically if you want to mix those colors. But when I was painting portraits for years, I only use these 5 colors, and I'd say maybe 1 in 10 portraits I would use something else. But for the most part, any color in the world that you see, you can mix with these 5 colors. So let's get started. I've picked out some colors here in this photograph, and this photograph is a glossy photograph, and it's been laminated with a glossy laminate on top so that we can check our colors right on the photograph. You can also, if you're working from life, use a color checker. We sell them at GenevaFineArt.com, but you can also make your own color checker. But if you're working from a photo, the best thing is to have a glossy photograph, get it laminated, and then you can check your colors right on the photograph like you're going to see me do right now. So to begin with, we're going to mix this white, and it's really not a white. It looks like a white in this little pot or whatever it is, but that color there, which is a white, ceramic pot, we're going to mix that color. So let's begin, and if you don't know what to do and you're confused to even how to get started, just do your best and just grab some random colors like I'm going to do here. I'm going to pretend I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of everything and put it into this pile here and just mix it up and just see what I get. And now the first thing I'm going to do is see if my value is good, if the darkness or lightness. So if we put a spot right on there, you can see that my paint is too dark. So I need to lighten it up, and I'm going to lighten it up with white. If we lighten a color, there's only 2 ways we can do that: yellow, white, or both. And so you got to think about the color that you're trying to mix. So for instance, if you were going to mix a yellow lemon, you would definitely use yellow to lighten your color. Or if you're going to mix an orange color, you would definitely use yellow. But if the color is like a blue or a purple, you're going to for sure use white. And that's why the white and the yellow are in the location they are on this color wheel, because you can see that the white is over on the blue and the purple side, yellow's over on the yellow, obviously, and the orange side. So in this case, I need to lighten up my color, and I'm going to lighten it up by adding yellow, white, or both. And I'm not even sure which one to add, so I'm just going to do a little bit of both. And we're just trying to get our value correct to begin with, meaning the lightness and the darkness. We'll put that spot right on the photo, and it's still a little bit too dark, so we'll just add some more. I'm just going to go with white and a little bit of yellow. You use yellow to lighten a color just as often as you use white. Very often people will use white almost for any time they want to lighten up a color, but you'll use yellow just as often as white. So when you lighten a color, it's either yellow, white, or both, and typically it's both. Put that spot on there, and now my color is too bright. You can see that my spot is a little bit brighter or lighter than the background. So I need to darken it down, and I'm going to darken it down with a little bit of blue because I can also see that my color is more orange. So we'll add a little bit of blue to it, which will darken it down and also get rid of the orange, because as you can see, blue is on the opposite side of the color wheel as orange. So we're still working on the value, trying to get the darkness and lightness the same, and we're getting real close on value. I think mine's still a little bit too bright. So again, I'm going to add some blue to it because I still think my color is a little too brown, which means orange. So my color is a little too orange. So I'm going to add some blue and basically do 2 things at once. I'm darkening the color a little bit by adding the blue, and I'm also shifting it in the blue direction. So once I get my value right, and I think we're just about there, the next question will be, what's the difference in the color? and my color is very close. You could even live with that color. That color's easily close enough if you were painting. But I'd say that the photograph is still a little bit more blue or possibly more purple than the spot of paint. So we're simply going to add a little purple to it, a little bit of blue, a little bit of red. Now I'm already happy with my value, and that red is really strong, so you got to be careful with that. But I'm happy with my value, and this blue and red are going to darken that color down. So I'm going to add a little bit of white with the color just to keep my value in check. And I might have added too much white there, but we'll see. So this workflow that I'm showing you, we're focusing on getting the value first, and then after we get the value, we're going to adjust the color. And there's only 6 ways that you can adjust the color. You can move it in the direction of yellow, move it in the direction of green, move it toward the blue, purple, red, orange. So when we put a spot on here, assuming that the value is right, which I think we're getting close on value, but if I put that spot there and my spot is a little bit too bright, and I would say slightly not blue enough, or you could say that my spot is a little bit more orange or brown, which is brown is the same thing as orange, and so we're going to put in the opposite of orange, which is blue. And that's going to do 2 things. It's going to darken the value down, which we need to do, and it's also going to shift it toward the blue. So now we're real close. And I think that's close enough for sure. I wanted to quickly mention that I teach private classes at my studio, and it's a 6-day workshop. And if you're interested in taking classes from me in person or even online, email mark@drawmixpaint.com and I'll give you more information on my private classes. Okay, so the next color we're going to mix is this spot right here on the table, and we're going to try to mix this color right here. So again, we're just going to start off, and I'm just going to grab some random colors without even thinking, just so that we can, I almost don't mind getting it wrong, just so I can show you that even if you start off on the wrong foot and you don't even know what you're doing, you just mix up some color and then we go from there. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is get our value right, meaning the darkness and the lightness of this color. So if I put this right here on the spot that we're going to try to mix, you can see that my color is far too light. So I need to darken it down. And it looks like burnt umber would be a good guess as to what I might need, but let's just add both. And so when I want to darken a color, I only have 3 choices: blue, French ultramarine, burnt umber, or both. And if you mix both of them together without anything else in it, you get black. But these are our darkener colors. These are our lightener colors, and these are the colors that we use to darken it. So my value was too light, so I just added a little bit of blue and a little bit of brown, mostly brown. And we're just darkening that color down and trying to get our value right. Always going to focus on value first. So our color's, I think, still a little bit too bright, and it looks too purple at the same time. So we have to get our value right before we really try to nail the color. But as I look at this, I can see that my color needs to be darker, but it also needs to be less purple. I would say my paint is more purple. So the opposite of purple is yellow. Okay, but I need to darken it down. So if I add yellow, that's going to lighten it up, lighten my pile even more, and that's in the wrong direction. I want to make it darker. So I'm going to use the dark version of yellow, which is burnt umber. You can almost think of burnt umber as dark yellow. It can also be used as an orange, but in this case, I'm using it as a dark yellow. If you have a yellow banana on a yellow tablecloth, that deep shadow right there in the bottom of the banana is going to be pure burnt umber. So let's add a little burnt umber. Remember, our color is too purple and it's too light. So we're trying to darken it down. The burnt umber is going to do that, and it's also going to get rid of the purple. because burnt umber is like dark yellow. And if you look at its position on the color wheel, you can see why it's been placed where it is, because burnt umber is just like dark yellow or even like a dark orange. So a little burnt umber to get my color darker. And it still looks too red, so we're going to do the opposite of red. So the opposite of that red is going to be green, so we're going to add a little bit of green to it. And the blue's a darkener, and the yellow's a lightener. So they're going to, the two of them together shouldn't affect the value too much. But I've just added yellow and blue, and now my color is going to be less red. Okay, let's check. So it's getting closer, but still a little bit too purple. The opposite of purple is yellow, but again, this yellow will lighten up my color too much, so I need to add some burnt umber, which is like dark yellow, with the yellow. Okay, we're getting even closer, but mine is still too purple. So a little bit of yellow and burnt umber. It's going to get rid of that purple. Easily close enough. Okay, so now we're going to mix this color here in the rose. Is what I would call a vivid color. So this is a vivid color, and the workflow that we're going to use to mix this vivid color is exactly the same workflow you would use for any vivid color. So the very first thing we're going to need to do is make sure that our brush is clean. When you're mixing a really vivid color, it's the one time that you need a clean brush. And by clean brush, I mean this brush got some other paint in it. And if I'm trying to mix a really strong orange, I want yellow, red, and burnt umber only. I don't want any blue or any white, because those are the opposite of orange. And the first rule about mixing vivid colors is that you're going to attempt to mix the strongest vivid color that you can mix to begin with, which is really difficult as you start with a dirty color and then you try to, keep pushing it up to be a vivid color, and you'll never get there. So we're going to start by making this color as vivid as possible, and we're just going to take some red, and we're going to clean my brush with orange paint. Now this is not wasted color. I can take this color and mix it into some other color that I'm mixing, but I'm cleaning my brush and getting rid of all the white and blue that might be in my brush. So I'm just really working my brush into it. And then once I've done that, I want to leave as much of this paint on the palette as I can, because I can use that in some other color. But now I have a clean brush that's been cleaned in orange paint, and the only thing in this brush is yellow, red, and possibly burnt umber. But we're going to start with just red and yellow, and I'm going to make sure I'm getting just pure color. I don't want to get any other colors in here. And we're just going to mix red and yellow together to see what color we get. We're going to compare it to this spot, and we're thinking about value first, so that's a little too dark. It's also much too red. I can tell it's really much more of a yellow-orange. So we're going to take a bunch of this yellow, and I might even start over here, because if I try to add enough yellow to that pile there, it's going to be a runaway pile, and I'll have to put a whole tube of yellow in it to get it right. So I'm going to just start over here, and just the amount of red that was left in my brush is probably going to be enough. And let's just see what we have. Now we're thinking about value first, but I'm just trying to get the color sort of close just to kind of see what we've got. So I would say that that color is still too red and also slightly too bright. So let's just add a little bit of burnt umber to it. Remember, burnt umber is okay if you're trying to darken down an orange. You're certainly not going to be using blue. Remember, blue, the ultramarine, and the burnt umber are the two colors that we can use to darken a color down. So I'm certainly not going to be using blue when I'm trying to darken this orange. because blue is the opposite of orange, as you can see on the color wheel. So just a little bit of burr number to get the value where I want it. So that's close enough for me. And just remember, getting your colors exactly perfect is not the holy grail of painting. It's getting your values right when it comes time to painting. And you can watch the next video in this series where I talk about how to apply the paint to the canvas. But colors don't have to be perfect, because having a little bit of color shift in your painting is not going to hurt at all. In fact, it might even help it make it look better. One thing I want to mention is when you're checking your colors on your laminated photograph, you got to make sure that there's not glare all over your paint and all over the laminated photo. So as you're sitting there, if you have your photo mounted in front of you, everything behind you is where the glare is going to be coming from. So make sure the area behind you is dark. You can't have a big window or an open door with a lot of light coming in, because it's going to put glare all over your spots on your photo and make it a lot more difficult to get accurate color comparison. You can see what a big difference it is. This is without glare and this is with glare. And so go watch my video on how to set up an artist studio. I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video. So now that we've covered some basics on how to match one color to another, let's talk about mixing colors in the context of when you're actually painting. So for instance, if you're going to paint this little silver cup like I did, so the silver cup has a whole range of colors, all the way from black all the way to basically almost white. Same thing for the cloth in the background. The cloth has got starts in black and it goes up in small steps all the way up to the lightest color. So I'm going to give you a workflow that you can use, and it works every time for mixing colors before you start painting. Now keep in mind that when you do start painting, you're going to have these rows of color, but you're going to still play with your color. You're going to mix your steps together. You're going to adjust the color a little bit here and a little bit there, depending on what you're painting. So before we can even begin, we've got to decide what our color groups are. And color groups are basically things, not colors. So we have the color group, which is the cloth. We have the color group, which is the table. We have the color group, which is the silver cup. In the silver cup, there's actually multiple color groups, because as you can see down in the bottom, you have all that reflection of orange coming off of the table. It's basically just table color that's reflecting into the silver cup. Then you have those grays across the middle, and then the very lightest part at the top. All of that has got variation in color in it. So what we do is we start by saying a color group, the row of colors, which is what I call a color group, is a thing. So we have the table, the cloth, and the silver cup. And then once we've made up our minds what our basic color groups are, within those color groups there may be some color shifts. If the color shift is big enough, for instance like in this orange here, where you have the up near the stem, it's very green, and then the rest of it's very orange. You could say that the orange has two color groups in it. But I've got a whole video that covers choosing color groups, and I'm going to put a link to that video in the description of this video so you can go watch it. But basically we're going to choose our color groups, and then we're going to start with the darkest color in that color group, which is often black but not always, and then go in small steps all the way up to the lightest color in that color group. And then we'll be ready to paint once we've mixed all those colors. But let's first of all talk about the cloth in the background. The very darkest color in that cloth is going to be black. But before we even begin, we're going to start by mixing up some black. So we're going to take some burn umber and some blue and mix those two together. My brush has already been cleaned because it's a brand new brush, so I didn't have to worry about cleaning my brush. But whenever you're mixing black, you definitely need to clean your brush before you start painting. Okay, so notice that what I'm doing is I'm going to the photograph to determine my value. But when you mix your very first color in any color group, you have to go to the photo to find out what your value is. So you might mix up a color. Now if it's black, that's easy because black is black and it's not that hard to figure out what black is. But it's not uncommon for color groups to not go all the way to black. So you're going to have to mix up some color and then by trial and error go to your laminated photo and check that color to decide whether it needs to be darker or lighter. Now I didn't have to adjust the color because black is black. If I wanted a warmer black, I would have added some more burnt umber. If I wanted a colder black, I would mix my black with more blue in it, more French ultramarine. But in this case, it's just a basic black like most blacks are, and so it's about 50-50 burnt umber and French ultramarine. Keep in mind, you've got to clean your brush and a little bit of black paint before you start to use it, because any residual color that's left in your brush can pollute your black very easily. So once you clean your brush in black paint, you're ready to mix up some black, and then once we've mixed up the black, we're going to check it on our photo and then also paint a stripe of that black. So to get our next color in our line of colors, we're not going to go to the photo and decide what color do I need next and try to figure that out. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to mix a color and we're going to compare the color that we mixed to our last stripe. And so the black line there, we're going to mix up a color and compare it to that black line, and we're going to try to mix what I think is a good step. Now here's an example of some good steps, and you can see once this palette of color is done, you'll get a sense of how big your step should be from one color to the next, because we're going to start with black and go up a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter, all the way up to the lightest color. And so the question is, how big should that step be? So in this second color that I'm mixing, I'm comparing the step here, and I know this is actually a small step. The difference between those two colors is very small, but I like my first step out of black to be a really small step, and so that's why we're going to go with this first step. Now once you're happy with your step, you are permitted to go to the photograph, and I use that word permitted because it is breaking the workflow completely. If you start mixing up a color and then you want to go to the photograph and see how you're doing, or see, oh, I think this looks like that color over there, and you can get real distracted. So to stay on the workflow, we're going to not go to the photograph and check our color until we're happy with our value, and we're going to determine the value on the palette. So right here, I've decided that that's a good step, and I'm just comparing it to the last step. And again, I like my first step out of black to be small, so that's a small step. Okay, now that I've got this color and I'm happy with my step, I am permitted to go to the photo. So I'm going to go to the photo and I'm going to find that spot where the value matches before I judge my color. Okay, let me repeat that because that's confusing to a lot of people. You don't put a spot on the photo and then decide that you don't like the color until you have that spot in the place where the value matches or is really close. You may not get it perfect, but you do not want to judge a color when your spot's over here, because in that spot your color is too dark and it's not in the right spot in order to check the color. So I have to put that spot on the photo where the value matches. And once I've got that spot on the photo where the value matches, then I can judge the color. And the way we judge the color is we can ask 6 questions. We can say which one is more yellow, we can say which one is more green, which one is more blue, which one is more purple, which one is more red, and which one is more orange. And those are the only ways that when we're comparing one color to another, we can ask which one's lighter and darker, but we're determining that on our palette, so we're happy with our value because we compared our step and we decided our step was good. Then we go to the photo, we put that spot where the value matches, and sometimes that can take some time, but find that spot where the value matches, and once you get the spot where it more or less matches, then you judge the color. And the way you judge the color is by asking those 6 questions. Okay, now you're not going to ask those 6 questions because you're going to put your spot in that place where the value matches, and then you're going to say, oh, mine's too red, or mine's too green, and it's just going to jump out at you. But if you're confused and you're just not really sure, verbally in your mind, say those questions out loud and ask yourself, because a lot of times you'll be confused, but then if I come and I say, you tell me which one is more orange, and without actually saying that in your head and asking yourself that question, it won't jump out at you. But the moment I say which one is more orange, or which one is less orange, you can tell me. You can look at it and you can say, well, now that you mention it, yeah, I can see that mine is too orange. So sometimes you have to say all 6 questions, but very often, usually what you do is you put it on there and you say, oh, mine's too green, and it just jumps out at you. But if you're confused, go around and ask the 6 questions until you get an answer. Now keep in mind the 2 colors that can be confusing to people is if your color looks too gray. If your paint looks more gray than the photograph, it means your paint is too blue. Okay, if the photograph looks too gray compared to your paint, the photograph is too blue. So too gray, or if my paint is more gray, that means it's more blue. Simple as that. Just understand that. And also milky colors, which is another type of gray. But if your color looks more milky, that means your color is more blue. Simple as that. And then the other one that sometimes confuses people is brown. So if you look at your color and you say, my color looks too brown, that's exactly the same as my color is too orange. Okay, so just keep in mind. But otherwise, I really don't like to use any words for describing color other than yellow, green, blue, purple, red, or orange. The same words you learned in kindergarten are the words that we're going to use to define the color. And then the value is simply which one is lighter and which one's darker. So let me just repeat this workflow one more time. I'm just going to run through it just so you can understand the big picture here. So the very first thing we're going to do is choose our color groups. And our color groups are things, not colors. So it's going to be like the apple, the teapot, the fabric, or whatever it is. And then once you choose those objects, you start with the darkest color in that object, which is typically black, but not always. And then you mix that color. You paint a stripe of that color. Then you mix a color that's one small step lighter than your last color. You compare the stripe. Once you're happy with your step, you go to the photograph. You find that spot where the value matches. And then you ask yourself the 6 questions. The 6 questions are which one is more blue, which one is more purple, which one is more red, which one is more orange, which one is more yellow, and which one is more green. And once you, if your color is more green, you put the color on the opposite side of the color wheel, which would be red. If your color is too blue, you put orange. If your color is too yellow, you put purple. So one other thing I want to talk about, and that is if you're mixing a really orange color, like for instance this orange fruit sitting here, oftentimes the very darkest part of that orange fruit is going to be down in the shadow. So if we look right into the shadow, we might see black even. And so if you were going to mix the color group for this orange, you would start off by mixing up black, which has got 50% blue in it and 50% brown in it. But the problem is if you keep that black pile and you add yellow to it, as you should because you're mixing an orange color, so as you try to lighten up that black pile a little bit, if you put yellow in it, it's going to turn green immediately, and that's because all that blue's in your black. So when you're mixing a really strong color like orange, you need to leave that black behind and move from black to pure burnt umber as your next color, or even pure burnt umber with just some red in it. And you might even need to clean your brush to get rid of any blue that was left in there from when you mixed up your black, because orange has no blue in it. So you would mix up your black, and then you would take your brush and clean it in burnt umber, and then start with some fresh burnt umber for your next step. So you go black, burnt umber. That also would go for a blue color. So if you're mixing the color of a blue ball sitting on a table, down in the shadow, that shadow might start with black. And that black has got blue in it, but it also has burnt umber in it. And burnt umber is the opposite of blue. So you might need to leave your black pile behind and then move to pure French ultramarine or pure blue. Clean your brush in that blue and then start with pure blue. So you would go from black to pure French ultramarine as your first step. So in the description of this video is the link to the next video in this series where I explain how to paint in oil and how to take the colors that you've mixed and apply them to the canvas. So check that out. The link is in the description of this video. And thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.